change who we are. There's nothing better than to know we belong. We've been adopted by the Father of love. Our brother suffered on the cross in our place. We are kids of grace. He loves us still, even when we are so blind. No matter what we do to be good, His grace is greater than that. There's nothing better than to know we belong. We've been adopted by the Father of love. Our brother suffered on the cross in our place. We are kids of grace. We are kids of grace. We are kids of grace.
All right, ladies, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning. Today we have Chelsea Allen, and she's going to come up and speak with us and have a great conversation. She was born and raised in Southern California, but she went to college in Brooklyn, New York, and she was on a softball scholarship, and that's how she met her husband, Kellen, and you guys can see their picture up there. Are they not the cutest family? Oh my goodness. So her and Kellen have been married for 7 years. She has Bryce, the cute little boy she's holding, and he is 4, and Blake, her daughter, who's on Kellen's shoulders, she is 2, and she has another one on the way, a little boy again, and she's due in February, so she's coming up on that. Yay! Number 3. She used to be a NAVMO table leader, but now she serves with her husband in our college ministry called The Bridge. She has a huge passion for navigating motherhood. She misses being a table leader, and she was saying this morning that she really misses the breakfasts because you guys are amazing cooks, all of you. And it is true, we love our breakfasts. Her family loves being outside. They love spending time at the beach and going to new parks and being with friends and family. So if you guys could give a warm welcome to Chelsea, and she'll come up here and we could give her our attention.
Thank you, Lindsay. I really am so excited to be here today. I miss being here on Fridays so much. And like she said, for so many reasons, I miss being here, but particularly that spread of food. I haven't had the same breakfast on a Friday since I have led a table here at NAVMO, so I hope you guys do not take for granted that spread of food. I actually ate this morning, and someone warned me. They're like, "You're gonna be okay to eat right before you go up?" And I was like, food and me, we never have an issue. But I'm actually feeling a little bit. I'm a little winded. But I'm so excited and grateful to be here. And like Lindsay mentioned, I have a 4-year-old son, Bryce. He is a bundle of joy. He is a really bright kid, and he's really observant and attentive. I can never give him and his sister a cookie without him noticing who has the bigger cookie. He's just really attentive and aware of the size and the coolness and the color of the possessions that people have around him. And so his best bud's parents, they recently got a minivan. And I totally get why. Vans are legit. They're spacious. They have like 40 cup holders. They have those window shades. Most of them have TVs. I'm convinced that a lot of them have a Starbucks barista in the back seat. And I think the coolest thing in the eyes of a 4-year-old is that those doors, they slide open, they don't swing open, and they also do it automatically. And so my son, he's so funny. He'll be like, "Mom, we should really get a minivan." And I don't tell him this, but it's probably inevitable we'll get one day. And he'll go, "Mom, we need to get a minivan." And I'll be like, "Well, bud, God has been so gracious to provide us with a car, and it serves the exact same purpose as their van does. So we need to be grateful for our car and that we even have one to begin with." And he'll go, "Yeah, I know, Mom. I'm just wishing." But it made me think, we're no different than our kids, are we? We're frequently looking around at what other people have, and we're constantly just wishing we could have what's theirs over what's ours. And as moms especially, I think we just wish so badly that our kids would be grateful for what they have and stop comparing everything they have to other people. We might think that comparison is just inherent to being a kid, but my hope today in this teaching is that we ourselves realize just how prevalent our tendency to compare is and establish reasons on why and how we can compare differently. That comparison trap, it starts when we're young, and it can be something as innocent as the size of a cookie. And then it progresses and it evolves just depending on the season of life that we're in or the age we are. We get a little older and we start comparing our body types. We start to compare the popularity circles that we hang in or our athletic abilities. We start to compare our grades, and then we get a little older and we compare our boyfriends, and we're no longer comparing the cars our parents drive, but we compare the cars we drive. And then we start to compare the colleges that we get into and that we attend. And then maybe we graduate college, or maybe we don't, but we start to get jobs and we compare the salaries that we have, the job titles that we have, the companies that we work for. Then we get engaged and we're comparing our engagement rings, our weddings, and we know as moms, the comparison trap, it certainly doesn't end there. Now, considering this example with my son, you're probably thinking, well, comparison, it's really innocent and it's harmless. But for many of us, I think comparing has become so routine that we often overlook just how destructive it is and how frequently we do it. And so that leads me to my first point, which is recognize your tendency to compare. Recognize your tendency to compare. Think about some of the things you might compare most. Do you compare your appearance, just the way you look, and how put together you are on a day-to-day basis? You go to the park and you look at another mom and she's not in yoga pants. Do you compare your complexion and your hair and your wardrobe? Or what about things like your financial situation? Do you compare your financial situation to other people? Maybe the jobs you have or the jobs your husbands have, or the size of your home, whether you rent or you own it. Do you compare the vacations you take, how extravagant they are or how not extravagant they are compared to other people? What about Disney season passes? Do you compare whether or not you can afford them? I bet we've all done that at some point. Do you compare the way you parent? We're here at NAMO establishing ways to be a better parent. Do you compare the way you parent to other moms around you? How you feed your kids? Do you feed them organic food versus store brand? Do you use essential oils, or do you slip them some Robitussin? Are they vaccinated? Are they not vaccinated? There's so many ways we can compare our parenting. Are we fun? Are we too fun? Are we disciplinary? Are we not disciplinary enough? It's unending. What about our kids, their behavior? How well behaved they are, how obedient they are, how quickly they developed, when they started walking, when they started talking. And depending on the answer, sometimes that makes us go back to compare the way we parented, right? If our kids are disobedient, we think it can oftentimes reflect on us, which sometimes it can, but we compare it to another mom's child and her behavior. What about your marriage and your husbands? Do you compare them? Do you compare what your husbands do, how they treat you, what your marriages look like? I was recently talking to a friend, and she was telling me about this festival that her and her sweet little family went to. It was just her, their 2-year-old son, and she said they were having the best time. She said she got all dolled up, and she was feeling really good about herself. Her husband was happy. Her son was like in his best 2-year-old toddler mood ever. She said it was just one of those outings where everything was going well, and she was just really grateful and content with the sweet little family that she had. But she admitted, she said she caught a glimpse of another young family, and that's when everything changed. She said they had 3 young kids, and they were actually kind of rowdy, which made her feel even better about her son's behavior, but it was the parents that caught her attention. She said they were slow dancing, and not even to slow music, which makes it that much more romantic. She said they were just completely fixated on each other without a care in the world who was watching or what the kids were doing. She said it just took this quick glimpse of them to completely change her mood. And she was just instantly distracted by all these comparing thoughts. Oh man, she looks way better than I do, and how come my husband didn't ask me to slow dance? He never asked me to slow dance, and they must have a better marriage than I do. She was just completely distracted by all these thoughts, and the second that she started to compare, Jealousy and envy entered the room, and contentment and gratitude, it left it. Now, it's likely and hopefully it's true that this married couple had a healthy and thriving marriage. I hope that's the case. But when we do find our eyes drifting from side to side, and if we're on our phones, on social media, and we're scrolling up and down, it's really important that we recognize one moment does not define someone's life. I mean, think about it. Life is full of doors that we close to take our less than ideal reality and try to make that shiny, well-groomed one divert all the attention. We make the outside look really good. We take a dozen photo shots, and then we crop and we filter and we post the best one. And we hope that one's going to draw all the attention. I think if any of us were to make an assumption based off a quick glimpse, whether it be a good or a bad one, we'd probably paint a completely inaccurate picture of someone's life. And meanwhile, like my friend had admittedly done with this family at the festival, we take everyone else's highlight reel and we compare it to our intimately known reality. If my friend would have just kept her eyes fixed and focused on her family, she would have remained in a place of gratitude and contentment. But she didn't. She was distracted by another person's family, by this quick glimpse that she caught of them. Have you guys ever received a handmade gift from your kids? Maybe they're too little to make gifts, but at some point you'll receive a gift from your kids, and despite what it looks like, you're gonna love it. And, maybe it's for Mother's Day or your birthday, and it was clearly pulled from a whole bunch of old scraps from the craft cabinet, but you loved it because your kids made it for you. And you wouldn't want to exchange that gift for anything because it was given to you by your kids. Well, it's no different with God. It's no different with God. We should be just as grateful for the things that He gave us, even more grateful for the things that He gave us, and not want to exchange them for anything else. So that leads me to my second point, which is be grateful for what you've been given. Be grateful for what you've been given. So take a look at this shelf, this snazzy shelf. And this bookshelf, it represents you, and you are illustrated and you're decorated with a whole bunch of unique items, right? That top shelf represents your family. We each have a unique family, and you're like, mine is sure unique. That is correct. Or, everyone has a different size family. Everyone has families that live closer or are further. Some of us are closer with our families than others. And then there's the wealth shelf. Some of us own our houses, some of us rent our houses, some of us small houses, some of us big houses. Some of us have inherited money. Some of us have not inherited any money. Some of us have higher paid salaries than others. And there's that third shelf that represents our gifts and our talents. Some of us are really good cooks. I am which am not. Some of us are really good singers. I can prove to you, I am not. But we all have unique gifts and talents, and God has done that purposely for us. And then that fourth shelf, your story, that book represents your story, your history, your past, the things you've been through, the places you've lived, the trials you've been through. That's your unique story. And then lastly, the last shelf, that is your appearance, your looks. We all look different. Some of us are curvy. Some of us are skinny. Some of us are in great health. Some of us aren't in great health. Some of us have great genes and we bounce back from that pregnancy like no other. And some of us don't. We all look different, but we all look unique for a really good purpose. So what we do, though, is we take someone's top shelf and we're like, I wish I could have a family who's that fun. And then we take someone else's shelf and we look at their talents and we're like, they're such an incredible cook. I wish I could be a cook like that. And then we look at someone's appearance and we're like, I wish I could just be naturally thin like they are. So what we do is we take this bookcase and we pick and choose each of the shelves that we like most, and we make some fabricated, fictitious bookcase that doesn't even exist. We've likely never envied every single shelf on someone's bookcase, have we? We will never find a bookcase that's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect person. We will never be that person, but the good news is we're not intended to be that person. We are not intended to be a perfect person. And every time we pick and we choose and we try to replace someone else's shelf with our shelf, we diminish the uniqueness of our bookcase. We diminish the unique way that God has made us. What you do with what's on your bookshelf is so much more important with what's on your bookshelf. What you do is more important than what you have. What you do with what you have is more important than what you have. And I think specifically nowadays, the battle is against us more than ever, because just within seconds, you can log into so many different apps. There's Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram. I don't even know some of the names of the new ones out there, but in just instance, we can log in and look at all the things that we don't have, all the places we can't afford to go and never will go, all the clothes we can't afford to buy or that we wouldn't look as good in. And we can do that before even getting out of our bed in the morning. So it's definitely against us, and it deters our focus away from what we have, and it fully puts our focus on the things that we don't have. None of this, though, should keep us from being grateful for what we have. Do you guys remember the old PC computer model computers? I feel like I'm aging myself, but I'm not that old. But technology has advanced quite a bit these days. The old PC models, and you'd have to reboot all the time. They would freeze all the time. And I distinctly remember I'd be in the middle of a really good AIM chat. Remember AOL Instant Messenger? And maybe I was talking with a crush, or I don't know what it was, but then the computer would freeze, and I'd be like, they're gonna sign off, what am I gonna do? Or I'd be on the 6th page of an essay that was due the next day, and all of a sudden, the computer would freeze. And back then, way back in the day, it didn't save. And I remember it was so inconvenient to have to Control-Alt-Delete, right? Everything was gone. But this is exactly the approach we need to take when we find ourselves comparing. We need to Control-Alt-Delete. We need to control. We need to control our thought process, and we need to shift our minds and our perspective onto something more productive. Alt. We need to consider an alternative perspective and focus on something that's much more productive. And then delete. Best case scenario, we need to delete our comparison altogether, or at least compare ourselves in a way that is constructive, which we will go over soon. So let's go over 5 ways that we can shrink our attention away from what we don't have and grow our attention on what we do have. So the first one, embrace your uniqueness. Embrace your uniqueness. Psalm 139, 13 through 14 says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." God did not overlook the way he made you, what he made you look like, or the stories he's given you. We have all been given a unique set of looks, gifts, talents, families, and we need to leverage those. Maybe you're gifted in something as simple as encouraging someone. Encouraging another mom can go a really, really long way. And maybe you're not gifted in cooking, but you're really organized. I, which am not, so don't come to me for cooking or organization. But, bless someone with those talents of yours. Offer to cook, or get together with a friend and show them some easy skills, or help a friend get organized. Embrace and leverage the uniques that you have and steer your focus away from all of the gifts that you haven't been given. A second way is to seek contentment. Seek contentment. So 1 Timothy 6:8 says, "But if we have food and clothing, with these things we will be content." So let's just take this morning, for example. You're all well fed. I know that because there's 2 long tables of food. So you're all well fed. You're all fully clothed. Awesome job. That can be a challenge at times, especially on a Friday morning. You're all well clothed. Your kids are clothed, or at least I think so. They were allowed to go into KBC. You got here. You had transportation to get here. There are so many reasons to be content this morning. When we focus on our desires, or being content on our actual needs versus our wants and our desires and our expectations being met, we really do start to realize just the joy in our daily lives and how much we have been blessed with. Third one, express gratitude. So these days, especially, I'm pregnant, and so I open my closet, and there's not a lot that fits me, and this is where I have to quickly Control-Alt-Delete, because I have to stop, I have to control my thoughts. I'm comparing myself to before I was pregnant. I'm comparing myself to before I had kids. That's silly. And I'll stop, and I'll have a different perspective. Okay, these clothes don't fit me because I am growing a human, and that is a gift, right? And so I stop the grumbling, and I thank God for this growing gift in my stomach. And I stop comparing. And it might sound silly, but we need to do this with everything. I think, when we're cleaning, we might be cleaning for the 30th time that week, but yet our house, it just never seems clean. But then Sally's house is always so clean. Like her floors, they shine, and you just want to know what she does all day or what type of floor cleaner she uses. But maybe Sally has older kids where she has the means to clean more, or they're less, messy. Or maybe Sally has someone help her clean the house, which there's nothing wrong with. But we need to stop comparing Sally's house to our situation, and we need to be grateful that we have floors to clean, that we have kids to make them dirty. And when we're doing the dishes, we need to be grateful that we have kids' mouths to feed and that we have food to feed them with. And I think it's really important that when we're expressing gratitude, we do it consciously, but we also do it verbally. We do it to where our kids can hear us. Because the truth is, and you've probably heard this before, but more is being caught than what is taught. And by just proactively expressing gratitude for the things that we have, like the dishes and the food, it goes a long way with our kids and their gratitude towards the little things that we often overlook. So one of the things that my kids and I have implemented is saying 3 things we're grateful for when we find ourselves grumbling. If they ask for a snack, which happens about every 15 seconds, if I say no, and for good reasons, and one of them starts to complain because their minds are instantly fixed on what they can't have, I'll say, wait, stop. Let's say 3 things we're thankful for. Let's say 3 things that we have to be grateful for. And doing that, not only for me and for them, but it completely changes their attitude and their approach and just the whole demeanor and vibe of that moment. So that's a really good thing to consider implementing with your kids or even with yourself when you find yourself kind of groaning over something that you can't have. I think when we look at these last 3 things and we establish it's just a good foundation for having gratitude for what we have, it helps remove that jealousy and that envy. And it allows us to have an even more genuine gratitude for what other people have. And so that's the 4th one, is to show compassion for what other people have. Show compassion for what other people have. So it is good that we stay humble and that we recognize we have been given with things that not everyone has been so blessed with. But this doesn't have to be just with possessions. It can also be with circumstances, right? Consider, another mom in a Target store and their kid is having a tantrum. I think it's really tempting for us to leverage that scene as a way for us to boost ourselves up and think like we're mom of the year because our kid is not having a tantrum in that moment, right? And so we might not say anything or outwardly express anything, but inwardly we're feeling pretty proud about the way our kid's behaving. Let's stop that and let's pray for that mom, or let's be discerning about sharing a kind word or an act of kindness to make her day a little bit better, because we all know we've been there. And so let's show compassion for what other people have and what they're going through. And then lastly, let's celebrate what others have. Let's celebrate what others have. Philippians 2:3 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." So we need to celebrate others by genuinely complimenting them. We need to genuinely compliment them. So have you guys ever owned maybe a blouse, and it's your favorite blouse? You wear it every chance you can, and every time you wear it, you feel good in it. And then you see another mom in that blouse, and you're like, ugh, she looks so much better than me. And that's no longer your favorite blouse, right? And inwardly, you're jealous at how much she's rocking that shirt. but compliment her on it. Give her a compliment on her on it. I think genuinely smiling at her and complimenting her on it, it kills the self-pity, and then it helps us cultivate less of a comparing and critical spirit, but more of a kind and productive way of just blessing someone else, because they might not think they look as good in that blouse as we do, right? So let them know how you feel about the way they look in that blouse. Now, what if you see another mom handling a situation really well? Tell her, be like, that was awesome. Or maybe you just admire a mom for the way she does things, or the way, she disciplines or is intentional with her kids. Tell her about it. Celebrate just the areas in motherhood that you see her doing well in. It is really good and it's healthy for us to have an outspoken admiration for people, but admiring is a lot different than comparing. So make sure that when you find yourself admiring someone, you don't let that creep into the comparison. There will always be someone, who has more than we have. There's always going to be someone whose child is smarter, who's more, better behaved, whose husband asked them to slow dance more often. But that can't take our attention away from what we have and being grateful for what they do. Now, we've mentioned it a couple of times today, but there's another direction that we compare ourselves, and this is downward. This is that downward comparison, right? When we're leveraging the kid in the Target store and we're boosting ourselves up in our kids' actions. If we see someone else's marriage struggling, we feel a little bit better about ours. Or if someone's a little bit heavier than us, we feel better about our body. Or if maybe we go over to a friend's house often and it's always messy, we feel better because our house is cleaner and we feel like that makes us a better housewife. So this is just another really destructive way that we compare ourselves. But there is a way we should be comparing ourselves that is construction, and this is comparing ourselves vertically to God. And that leads me to my last point, which is compare yourself in the right direction. Compare yourself in the right direction. So when we laterally and we downward compare, like Heather Pace taught us a few teachings ago about beauty, not only is the standard that we're comparing ourselves to, it's ever changing, but it's a standard based on imperfect people in an imperfect world. But when we compare ourselves to God, we're comparing ourselves to perfection because He is perfection. That's what holy means. Holy means that God is perfect. He's completely without a blemish. He has no flaws, no marks. So I want you to consider a whiteboard, a big whiteboard, and it's fresh out of the plastic. Fresh out of plastic. It's shining. There's no nicks. There's no marks. It's completely clean. That's God and His holiness. He's completely without blemish. And then I want you to imagine a big, thick, black Sharpie. And that's our sin. That represents our sin. And so sin means that we're doing things our way versus doing things God's way. We're doing things our way versus doing things God's way. And so I think even just reflecting on some of the tendencies that we gone over today, we can all acknowledge that we have sinned, right? So take that clean white whiteboard and that black Sharpie, and every time we're jealous over someone else's house, make a mark on it. That's sin. Every time we're ungrateful for what we have, that's a sin. Every time we grumble over the way our kids are behaving, that's a sin. Every time we wish we looked like someone else, that's a sin, right? All of these things that we do, we're doing our way. That is certainly not God's way, so they are all a sin. And it doesn't matter how big or how little the mark is. It doesn't matter how many you have, if you have a lot or have a little. None of us have a clean, clear whiteboard. All of us have a blemish, so we are all in sin. And it's important for us to recognize that there's no good deed we could do. There's no accomplishment we can obtain. There's nothing we can personally do to erase these marks from our whiteboard, to erase these sins that keep us from being in a relationship with God. Because God is perfect, He cannot be in a relationship with sin. And so we are disconnected from Him because He is holy. He is completely and perfectly without blemish. So don't think that if you have a large bank account, that makes you less of a sinner than someone else. Or don't think that just because your kids are more well-behaved than yours, that makes you less of a sinner than someone else. Or because your marriage is thriving. All of us have marks on on that whiteboard. All of us are in sin, and there's nothing we can do to erase them. And laterally comparing our sins to someone else's around us, that still doesn't make us sinless, like I said. There's nothing we can do to leave ourselves without a mark on the whiteboard. So I want to challenge you, the next time you're comparing yourselves, are you going to compare yourselves to the world and your own standards, which are imperfect, or are you going to compare yourselves to a holy and perfect God whose standard is absolutely perfection? Now, I don't want to leave you today feeling like there's no solution. I want you to be encouraged that there is, and in the upcoming weeks, there's going to be a solution in which we go over what that is and how we can be made right with God, and what can happen in order for us to erase our sin and be, have a clean whiteboard and be in a relationship with God. So please be encouraged, and I certainly hope that the practical takeaways of today are helpful and that you can implement ways to be more grateful for what you have, but that you do focus on the importance of stop laterally comparing yourselves to each other and vertically compare yourself to God. And please ask questions. That's what you're here for. Ask questions to your leaders, either openly as a group or one-on-one, but you guys are equipped with people with answers, and you're very blessed to be here, and I am so, so grateful for my time that I was able to spend with you guys. So have a good rest of your day and really good, fruitful discussions.